So this morning, I want to talk for a little while about how we learn to distrust our own experience, our own inner authority to orient in reality, put it that way, and how that gets set up, and the implications for this, what I'm calling sort of people pleasing, and how how we need to recover an inner authority, what I call an inner sense of our legitimacy in order to live our own life. So let me start at the high level here. Let's go from the spiritual to the psychological, and if we have time, we'll get to the body, knowing they're all related. They're all one. You can make distinctions between the three, but they're all reflections of the other. So uh, let's make that clear. So here's my high level spiritual uh, observation based in my own experience of life, at having sort of searched for the meaning of life and the purpose of life for decades, and where I've come to, and that is that we have a soul covenant, and the soul covenant, we come into this incarnated reality of being ourselves of this life with a covenant, and the covenant is essentially to be ourself, to express ourselves fully while we have breath. That's it. That's it. And if we're doing that, we're in covenant. That it is the primary act of faith. Keeping faith with ourselves is also keeping faith with source. That's my contention and my experience. And you know, it seems to work something like this based on what's come through, is that whatever that is that births universes, infinite universes, moment by moment by moment, call it God, call it source, call it big heart, big mind, call it wisdom, intelligence, who knows? That is a mystery. But whatever that is, we're made in the image of that. That's the contention of the Judeo-Christian tradition and of many religious and spiritual lineages. Like if you go Eastern, it is the claim would be we are that, localized as Bruce and Liz and Sharon and Tony and Annie. That's we are that in human form. And what that desires more than anything is for us to express ourselves fully, creatively, uniquely, because nobody else can express the image of that God the way we can. And we're here to do that. And I think now this is getting a little out there, but just stay with me. I think that the reason this is set up is like there's an information feedback loop with the big thing, with the source. And it is that by being ourselves fully, that gets to know itself uniquely as you. And there's a kind of divine joy in that. There's a kind of pleasure in that. And so by being ourselves, we enable source to continue to evolve and grow because of the feedback loop. So it also has explanatory benefits in terms of why we feel so good when we're expressing ourselves authentically. And I think that is because there is this alignment. It's like, okay, now connected to that, connected to the land. The meeting place is our heart. We're being ourselves, whatever the cost, and we feel in the flow. That whatever we're doing when we're in that flow, in that alignment, it's like Krishnamurti puts it this way: the experiencer disappears into the experience. So essentially, there's a no self experience of being in the flow, because we're so into the experience that there's no me over here saying, oh, look at that out there. We're like in it. We're one with life, one with reality, and one with the big one. And that is that the experiencer disappears into the experience, or the observer disappears into the observed, is another way he puts it. So this is the big spiritual picture, frame. And that's why, you know, the mantra that came to me during an ayahuasca experience when my ego dissolved, and the realization was that I hadn't been living my own life. And so it became important to me to drop into what is that? How am I in integrity? And when I'm living my own life, I'm living in faithfulness to the soul's covenant, which is to be in a faithful relationship with Source. So, like, to the ego, to the egoic mind, it sounds selfish, right? It's like, well, you know, it's like you just be yourself and you're living in faithfulness to the covenant. And I say, yeah, absolutely. But the paradox is it's the ultimate act of unselfishness to express yourself as fully as possible, because it's an experience of no self. It's an experience of the realization of living from the image, your divine image, and in that there is this. It's like it's such a complete self-expression that you disappear into it, into the flow of life. So it's not selfish. And so whether, it doesn't matter what that looks like, if you're a poet, if you're a gardener, or if you're a parent, if you're, you know, you work with your hands and you love it, as long as you love it and it's like who you are, then there is spiritual fulfillment. Okay, so that's the high level. But in order to do that, we have to live our own life, and there's the rub. By the time, and I would say based on my sample, by the time most of us arrive at adulthood, we have been treated in such a way that we're alienated from our true life. So we're living somebody else's life, and we don't even know it often. Except for it manifests in some kind of anxiety, some kind of depression, some kind of lack of vitality. Maybe it manifests in illness, some kind of bodily symptom. Because I think that's ultimately what illness is that we're not, the life force is not flowing through us and animating ourselves. And so there's illness that can manifest. So, and one of the ways that this happens is what I'm going to talk about this morning, is we learn to distrust our feelings. We learn to distrust our sensations. We learn to distrust our instincts. We learn to distrust our intuition, because the authorities in the picture are invested in us fitting in and belonging and making their life easier, or because of their own intergenerational trauma, they're unconsciously invested in passing that trauma along to us, what the Christian scripture, you know, the Christian theology calls original sin, as if we're born sinners. We're not. But all the intergenerational trauma lands on us, and in effect, it might as well be original sin, because our parents, let's just say parents, have not cleared up their unconscious wounds, and so they get passed on to us. So essentially, the way that we're treated from the time we enter the womb to our birth experience, to infancy, through toddlerhood, and through those formative years is such that we're told that our feelings and sensations and intuitions and instincts are not legitimate. They're not valid. They're not true. They're not actually happening the way we're experiencing them happening. And shame is the primary culprit here, because we'll have a big feeling and we'll hear something like, straighten up. I'll give you something to cry about. Or we get hit, or we get humiliated, or we're told, we're gaslit. What's going on for you actually isn't going on for you. It's just like you're just having a fantasy. R.D. Laing calls this process mystification, and it happens primarily in families, but it extends out to cultural institutions as well, where we're taught to distrust our feelings, our sensations, as if what's happening to us is not actually happening to us. And in extreme cases, this causes such a profound degree of alienation that it ends up being noticed by psychiatric institutions, and there's all kinds of labels for it. But whether you're talking at one end of the continuum, schizophrenia, all the way to people who've been able to adjust fairly well, and then it manifests in what I'm calling people pleasing, where we're functional. Maybe we're even highly functional. Maybe we're even successful, but we're still not living our own life. It's still an alienated life. It's just that we're intelligent enough to compensate for that in such a way that we were able to read the environment. What is required of me here not to experience shame? What is required of me here to be liked, to belong, to feel like I'm a legitimate human being, because that's what we're here for. We just want to feel like we're legitimate. And so we will twist and contort ourselves into any form in order to have the sense that we matter, that we are lovable, that we are worthy. And if that means denying our feelings and sensations and intuitions and instincts, then so be it. And it's a highly intelligent adaptation. We each do it in our own unique way. And the result is this is my definition of ego. We actually structure a personality that helped us to get through. And then at some point we realize that, and you could call that structure ego, you could call it false self. Sometimes I call it the trying self, because you just have to try harder and then you'll belong, then you'll be loved, then you just have to deny your true feelings. You just have to figure out a way to conform to the external environment in order to survive. And you could call it the false self. But the thing is, it can take decades to wake up to the fact that you're doing this as a survival gesture. And then you discover that what worked in terms of helping you survive actually is getting in the way of you living your one true life. And then comes the kind of maybe the sense that something's off comes to you in a little bit of sort of chronic sadness, maybe an inexplicable illness, maybe you're just anxious all the time. Because as I mentioned, I think last time, it's like anxiety is not being 100% sure that how you are feeling, thinking, how you are speaking, how you are behaving in the world is acceptable. And so it generates anxiety. So, as I mentioned, Artie Lang is a Scottish psychiatrist. He worked mainly with schizophrenic people. And he started to wonder, so what's the common element here? And so he was one of the first to go to the families and observe what was happening in that family. And in almost every case, he saw that the person who was carrying the label of schizophrenic had coped with, just call it bad treatment, of not feeling legitimate, not feeling legitimized in this environment, by disappearing into their own world, through a complete alienation where they prefer to talk to themselves and relate to somebody else, because the moment they related to someone else, it confirmed that they were wrong, that they didn't matter, that they were unlovable, that they had done something wrong. So then the way back out of this is, first of all, to realize the setup. And this is not easy, because the denial is strong. The psychological mechanism of denial. At least, like, my experience was, it was very strong. It couldn't be true. Like if I was punished, it's because I deserved it. If I was mistreated, it's because obviously I did something wrong. And so there's a core belief that sets in place that it's my fault. And if it's my fault, and that's generalized, as an adult, that's generalized, is like, then I can't trust what I'm actually going through here, because I don't know if it's valid or not. I don't know if I'm legitimate. And so we become hesitant. And what replaces the full self-expression is the capacity to read the room for what others are expecting of us. Who do they need us to be at this moment? Do they need me to be entertaining? I can do that. I learned that. Do they need me to be charming? I can do that. Do they need me to be quiet? I can do that. Do they need me to be big? I can do that. Do they need me to be small at this moment? I'll do that as well. Do they need me to be perfect? Perfect behavior, very polite. I can do that. I've learned that very well. And I know I have this nervous system memory of what it feels like to be rejected, to not belong, to not be loved, to be humiliated. And I'll do anything to avoid that. And that's why denial is so powerful. And you hear yourself saying things like, it wasn't so bad. Others had it worse. And no, if they were punishing me that severely, it's because I was a bad kid. I watched a Netflix series the other day about, basically it was a psychopath. Or if Liz, you could turn your audio off, that would be great. And when he was being interviewed by the cop, he was brutally treated. And he said, oh, yeah, but I was a very difficult child. So they had to do this for me. It was for my own good. Alice Miller wrote a book called that. She's a German psychiatrist. And she was one of the first ones who started to expose childhood abuse and the impact on the personality, and further and extend it out from there, the impact on our social institutions that are created by egoic personalities, after all. And she called the book For Your Own Good. So breaking through the denial is the tricky part, because what awaits us invariably is grief. Because when you start breaking out of the mystification, when the fog starts to clear, and you start to take yourself seriously as a human being who deserved to be treated well, who came into the world expecting that, then it's like, how could it be that I was treated this way? Like, how could anybody do that to another human? And then it's like, and then you understand why you develop the core belief, like it must be my fault. Because if it's their fault, what does it say about them? They can't be like that. I must have done something wrong. I must be bad, which is another core belief that we have to compensate for, because it's a shame-based belief. So what awaits us is the grief that eventuates in. I've been with people, and I myself have spent like many ceremonies just saturated in shame, just experiencing the degree to which I felt like I was illegitimate, like I was persona non grata, that I was bad. And then you hear the critical voice inside that's perpetually criticizing you. And all of that is awaiting. And in a sense, all of that is, it's necessary to go through that, to break through the denial. I think that's the only purpose of this authentic suffering, which is the path to healing, is that it has to be deep enough to break through the denial. But the bonus, the benefit of actually undergoing authentic suffering, when we've had to be in denial about it in order to survive, the benefit of that is that the experience is there, that there's an organic compassion for yourself that comes online. It's not something you have to manufacture or conjure up. It's just like you experience yourself. It's like, I'm so sorry that this it didn't just happen to you. Somebody did something to you. I'm so sorry that you had to experience that kind of treatment. And it was enacted often by the people who were supposed to love us, and that for their own reasons, they were unable to do it. And so, and the pivot towards healing happens as the self-compassion replaces the self-loathing at a deep primordial level. Because what happens and what shapes the people-pleasing personality, or the personality period, the survivalist in us, is that it eventuates in a self-loathing. And I know that's a strong word, but I think that for those of us who have had that kind of experience, that's where we land, actually. We develop a personality on top of that, so it's not visible. But again, what I'm talking about is the work here of breaking through the denial. And it's the work of undergoing reality. And undergoing reality as it was, not as we wish it was, is what clears the fog, clears the mystification. And we'll talk about more about this in subsequent talks. But the feeling is that often the fear of doing this kind of work, undergoing it, is that there's nothing left on the other side. There's no me there. But actually, what we discover is that you are the compassion that you extended towards your suffering self. You are that. And that compassion is also the nature of the originating source. And so the experience of compassion is the experience of our heart, which is what is made in the image of God, source, coming full circle. So that's the beauty of this. It's not like you need to try. It's not like there's a practice where you have to become more spiritual or meditate for 30 years or sit in a cave or, it's as if your true self is up ahead. And if you just work harder, you'll eventually get there. But you'll spend time frustrated because you can't really get there. There's some kind of ideal self up there when the truth is, and this is a really important spiritual notion, idea, reality, is that your heart self is the presence of compassion. So you didn't go anywhere. You didn't go offline. It's just that the other thing that waits underneath the grief is your heart. And the evidence for this is that you are able to extend love to yourself. And then you are able to extend authentic love to the world. And then you discover that your ideal self was always already present. And it's more a matter of dropping in than it is finding a spiritual practice to strive towards that ideal self. So it's always a dropping in. And that's the discovery, is that you don't have to worry about a new identity. Who will I be if I'm not this? If I'm not this egoic personality that I constructed, if I'm not this image of myself, if I'm not these various identities that I assumed, if I'm not the behavior that I displayed towards all my friends and my teachers and my colleagues and my family in order to be loved and accepted, if I'm not that, then what am I? Well, it just begins very simply with this felt sense of compassion, this tenderness for yourself and for the world. And that's the only evidence that is enough to orient. And then it's a matter of discovery, because that self will be discovered. It's an emergent self that responds to new conditions. And in a sense, you're being co-created as you respond to the new conditions of your life from your heart. Okay, I'm going to end there, and then we'll open it up for